Corbin was driving alone through rural Montana. On a cold October night in 2022, his plan was simple: leave Billings late, reach Missoula by dawn, and start a weekend hiking trip without wasting daylight on the road. He preferred night drives anyway, less traffic, faster travel, and a kind of quiet isolation he had always found calming. But that calm would not last. The highway he'd chosen wound deep into the mountains, through some of the most desolate territory in the lower 48. Out here, cell service was little more than a rumor. Gas stations were hours apart, and the chance of seeing another vehicle at this hour was slim. About 3 hours into the drive, something caught his eye in the rearview mirror. At first, Corbin thought it was just a trick of fatigue. But no, there was clearly a figure in his backseat, a silhouette, the outline of a person sitting perfectly still. His pulse spidey snapped his head around. Staring directly at the seat behind him, empty, nothing. He turned back to the mirror. There she was. The impossible contradiction repeated again and again. Every time he looked directly, the seat was empty. Every time he checked a reflective surface, someone was there, a woman, middle-aged, wearing a jacket, her form faint but unmistakable. Corbin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He adjusted the side mirrors for confirmation. The same vision appeared. She existed only in glass and reflection, never in reality. And then, disturbingly, she began to move in the mirrors. He watched her lean forward, as if trying to peer over his shoulder at the road ahead. Her brown hair fell into her tired eyes, her expression fixed in a grim, concentrated stare. Sometimes she shifted against the window, sometimes sat upright, sometimes turned her head to look at the passing trees. She behaved exactly like a living passenger, except she wasn't there. 30 minutes passed with this impossible passenger silently haunting him. Then something changed. She began waving her arms, pointing urgently, trying to get his attention. Corbin looked ahead. Clear highway. No hazards, nothing unusual. Yet the woman's movements grew frantic. Her hands slashed through the air, jabbing at something. Her mouth opened and closed, words he could not hear. And then he realized she wasn't pointing at the road. She was pointing at his mirrors. In the side mirror, faint headlights appeared, closing in fast. A vehicle was tearing down the highway behind him at a reckless speed. But when Corbin twisted around and looked through his rear window, the night was empty, total darkness. Just like the woman, the vehicle existed only in reflections. The lights bore down on him, and soon he could make out the shape, a semi-truck, massive, barreling down the road with no intention of slowing down. In the mirrors, it was so close he could almost feel the impact. Outside of them, there was nothing. The woman was nearly hysterical now, pounding on the back window in his rear view, screaming silently at him. Her panic was clear, her face pale with desperation. Corbin had only seconds to decide. His eyes told him the highway was empty. His instincts screamed to hold his lane. But the woman in the mirror, the impossible, unreal woman, was urging him to get out of the way at the last moment. Corbin yanked the wheel and swerved hard onto the shoulder. A blast of wind tore past. The vibration of heavy machinery rattled his car. He felt the thunder of a vehicle that should not exist. In his mirrors, the phantom semi roared past, its driver fighting to keep control of the trailing Taylor. The truck vanished around the bend at a suicidal speed, leaving the night silent again. Breathless, Corbin glanced at his mirrors. The woman was staring at him. No longer frantic, her face softened. She nodded slowly, a sad smile crossing her lips. Gratitude, recognition, relief, and then she began to fade. Her reflection grew weaker, her body more translucent by the minute. Before she disappeared completely, she pressed her hand against the glass in the mirror. Corbin saw it clearly, a fogged print forming on the glass. Letters traced into it backwards in the mirror. But when read correctly, they spelled "thank you." Then she was gone. Corbin drove the remaining miles to Missoula in silence, too shaken to play music, too weary to check his mirrors again the next day. Unsettled by what he had experienced, he searched local records of highway accidents. The results chilled him to the bone. That stretch of road had claimed many lives, most of them caused by semi-trucks taking the curve too fast, forcing smaller vehicles off the highway. The most recent had happened exactly 1 year earlier. A woman named Sarah had swerved to avoid a head-on collision with a semi. She succeeded in saving the other driver, but her car rolled down an embankment. She died before help arrived. Sarah's final act had been trying to save someone else's life, and perhaps even after death she still was. It was January 2019. When Ezekiel began his late-night drive from Chicago to Milwaukee, he had a job interview early the next morning, and figured that leaving at 11 p.m. would spare him traffic and get him into the city rested. His brother had lent him a dependable sedan with a good sound system, and Ezekiel had queued up some classic rock to keep himself awake. During the 90-minute ride, the first half hour of the trip was uneventful. Dark interstate nearly empty of cars. Only the hum of the engine and the music to fill the silence. Then the radio began to act strangely. The rock station he'd been listening to abruptly vanished, replaced by a talk radio broadcast. He frowned, reached for the dial to switch it back. But before he could, the station changed again, this time to country great. Ezekiel muttered loose wiring, but it didn't stop. Every time he tried to retune to his preferred station, the radio ignored him. The buttons responded. The dial clicked, yet the music would flip to something else. Classical hip-hop, news reports static. Over the next few minutes, the system cycled rapidly, skipping through fragments of songs, bursts of commercials, snippets of voices, until it sounded less like music and more like a deranged collage of noise. And then it stopped. A man's voice came through clear. Calm and direct. Ezekiel, you need to take the next exit. The car lurched as he almost swerved off the road. His name, the radio had spoken his name. His fingers fumbled over the controls, stabbing buttons, twisting knobs. Nothing changed. The voice continued. Steady, conversational. Too casual, too familiar. I know you can hear me, Ezekiel. Take exit 4.4 in 2 miles. There's something you need to see. His throat went dry. The voice didn't belong to any radio host. It wasn't part of any station. There was no background static, no ads, no identifiers. Just a man talking directly to him. I'm not taking any exits, Ezekiel said aloud, realizing how foolish it felt to argue with his car stereo. You will, the voice replied instantly, almost amused, because if you don't, you'll never make it to Milwaukee alive. His skin prickled. He twisted the volume knob. No change. He shut the radio off entirely. The voice went on unaffected. 1 mile now, Ezekiel, exit 344. His foot, without his consent, began to ease off the accelerator. His leg moved like someone else was controlling it. The car gradually slowing as the green exit 3.44 sign came into view. Good choice, the voice said, calm but approving. No, Ezekiel hissed through clenched teeth. He forced his foot down and sped past the ramp. The voice snapped. That was a mistake, Ezekiel. A serious mistake. Suddenly, every station the radio cycled to played the same thing. Recordings of car crashes, screeching tires shattering glass, metal twisting, people screaming. Over and over, the same horrific chorus. Then the car itself rebelled. The headlights dimmed, then blazed with blinding intensity. The windshield wipers jerked violently across the glass. Despite the dry weather, the AC roared. Freezing air then shifted to suffocating heat. Take the next exit, Ezekiel. The voice commanded harder now, or it gets worse. The steering wheel shook violently in his hands. The speedometer needle slamming from 0 to max and back again. His dashboard lit up with warning symbols, but they weren't random. They flickered in patterns. Spelling words: stop, turn, listen. What do you want from me? Ezekiel shouted. His voice cracking under the chaos. Instantly silence. The light steadied. The car stopped shaking. The radio went mute. Then the voice returned soft. This time tired, almost mournful. I just want to go home, Ezekiel. I've been trying to go home for 3 years. The digital display of the radio flickered. Instead of a frequency number, text began scrolling. James Morton died mile marker 67, January 15th, 2016. Ezekiel's eyes darted to the roadside signs. He was closing in on mile 67. The voice spoke again, and Ezekiel's chest tightened. I was driving to Milwaukee for a job interview. Just like you, I hit black ice right here. Car flipped 4 times into the median. Died instantly, that's what they said on the display. More words appeared. Please take exit 3.44. Tell my wife I made it home. Ezekiel's headlights illuminated the stretch of highway ahead. At mile marker 67, deep gouges marred the median, where a vehicle had once torn off the road. The guardrail there was bent unrepaired. His hands were shaking. As he turned the car around and drove back to the exit, GPS guided him to an address the radio displayed. It led to a small, modest house. When he knocked, a woman answered. Almost immediately, though, it was long past midnight. Her eyes widened, tears welling instantly, as if she had been waiting years for this moment. Are you James's wife? Ezekiel asked. His voice trembling, she began sobbing. How did you know? How did you find me? Inside, Ezekiel told her everything. An hour-long explanation of the impossible night. Patricia, her name was, confessed that for 3 years, she had been receiving phone calls from numbers that didn't exist, calls where she swore she heard her husband's voice. Always the same message: I'm trying to come home. When Ezekiel finally left, Patricia's tears had changed to something softer relief. Closure, the knowledge that her husband's restless spirit had finally found peace. On the road again, Ezekiel noticed something remarkable. His radio worked perfectly fine. Static stations, buttons, everything normal. but he could still hear the echo of the voice in his mind. Some messages, he realized, travel farther than any radio waves.